Michigan going for its 1,000th win this weekend. Michigan looking to avoid a quote-unquote trap game, which players and coaches this week have kind of pushed back against, saying that they don't really see it as that. I guess part of me is like, well, that's kind of what a trap game is you don't really see it coming. But they're well aware of the situation they're in. This was always going to be coming into the year. When you look at the schedule, it's sandwiched right there in between Penn State and Ohio State. But let's start with the 1,000th win and the situation they're in. Obviously would be a huge milestone, probably, planning, memorabilia and gear and all that sorts of stuff for if they're able to get it done. But it would be quite the feat to get 1,000 wins before any other college football program. And Michigan's going to do that, whether it's this weekend or next, because number 2, 962 is Alabama. Texas and Notre Dame tied at 945. So Michigan's still kind of extending its lead. The last few years have been big for the all-time win count. Yeah,
it's been helpful, right? And it'd be nice if they could close this thing out and go to 15-0, and Jim Harbaugh gets his tattoo on his ass. Yeah. And
we didn't say where he's going to get it, but
Well, I just assumed, So I think it'd be great, So
I agree.
Regardless, yeah, and I think that the good news is that we've seen that this team can rally without Jim Harbaugh, right? If it comes to that, so Sharon Moore did one hell of a job coaching these guys against Penn State. Was emotional, got some crap for it, which is a joke. And I like the thought of him down there on the sideline. I do want to see a better game plan, not a better game plan, but a more diverse game plan. And I think they had one coming out against Penn State. They just had to go off script, and they did a great job in adjusting to it. But in my opinion, this is a game where you should be able to throw on these guys and run on them as well. So I would expect a balanced attack, maybe 225 yards of offense on both running and passing the ball at least. And against this defense, Penn State put up 51 against these guys, right, with Drew Allar. So what does that tell you? And so, right. And you never know which Maryland you're going to get. And yeah, it's a trap game, but I expect Michigan to win this one pretty handily.
Yeah, to me, it's not a trap game. It's a tune-up game. I mean, this is one where, regardless of what happens with Jim Harbaugh, whoever's coaching this team Saturday, this team, because it is bigger than one guy, has to play Ohio State next week. And all of their goals are still in front of them. I think, if anything, last week's game took a lot of that off the coaches and put the spotlight on the team. This is still a good football team because it has great players, it has great coaches. We've talked about all that. So when you look at how this Maryland team, again, Clayton has made this point several times on here, where Maryland's a team where I think if you have to play them in September, you're probably going to, you're going to be in for a bit of a scare. But something that we've seen routinely with this program under Mike Locksley is that they are not about that life when it's time to step up and play big boy football against the class of the Big Ten East. So for Michigan this week, I think offensively, it just starts with, you want to keep that momentum up from running the ball last week. But also you have to last week was weird enough where you have to sort of reestablish that you do have a passing game that can be feared as well, which I thought last week was just more of a unique circumstance. A lot of people came out of that game thinking, oh, well, gosh, they can't throw the ball. That's going to hurt their chances down the stretch. No, we've seen it. We had 9 games of tape before that showed that they can move the ball through the air. They're probably at their best still when they move the ball through the air. But if you have that other phase of the offense coming along with that offensive line, with those running backs looking like we've expected them to look all year, then this team, all of a sudden, this is where it has to start looking different into this next phase of the season, the most critical phase of the season. I mean, everything is on the line over these next 3, 4, maybe as many as 5 games. So this is a big step for them in that regard. I mean, there's no looking over Maryland. This is a reestablish your dominance type of game.
It's funny. The same people that were saying all year that they can't run the football are now immediately saying that they can't throw anymore. And then you see the run game get going a little bit. They obviously just kept hammering away and got a few big plays against Penn State that were absolutely massive, for how that game turned out. You bring in the extra bodies, big bodies on the offensive line. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's going to look more like what we've seen from Michigan throughout the rest of the year against Maryland. Like you said, Chris, they give up 51 points to Penn State. Drew Allar throws for 4 touchdowns. And then the next week, it's just completely different. In this Maryland defense, again, it's hard to judge a lot of the numbers that these Big Ten defenses are putting up. They rank, about average in the country at about everything, but you're not playing high-powered offenses on a week-in, week-out basis. You are a little bit more in the Big Ten East when you have to play Ohio State and Michigan, even Ohio State down in terms of their numbers, so you don't have that outlier performance on the resume as you would have, in years past. But this is not a very good Maryland defense. I think J.J. McCarthy is going to be able to get going again in this game. And something interesting, too, just when you look at the matchup as a whole, I thought Derek Moore made a great point this week talking to the media on Tuesday night, but he said we can't show any weaknesses. We can't have any lapses or things on film that Ohio State can look at this week and look to exploit for the next week. And I thought it's a great point, because when you think about Michigan, Ohio State, with just the way the games at the end of the year, every single season, it seems like when you have a weakness, even if it's kind of bubbling under the surface and it doesn't come out all the time, the other team's able to exploit that. Like Ohio State, they're not a very physical team the last couple of years or whatever. Michigan able to expose them in 2021 and then kind of do it again late in the game in 2022. So I think it's important that Michigan plays clean in this game, plays well, and that, includes with the pass protection, which they had issues with early on against Penn State. Moving to Michigan's defense against the Maryland offense, they're facing Talia Tagovailoa for the third straight year. You're facing Josh Gaddis for the first time since he's moved on after the 2021 season, goes to Miami, gets fired, now at Maryland, and that offense really struggling. I want to read this clip from George Gerbo, who covers Maryland for the Washington Times, and this is basically him explaining their offense in our article up at thewolverine.com. You can check it out, but he says, more often than not, first down is either a handoff or a screen pass. Second down is some type of shot down the field or over the middle, because it's an offense that's predicated on big plays, but has in recent weeks found those hard to come by. And after those two plays, you're in something like 3rd and 7 or potentially longer, and it's either a sack, an offensive line breakdown, or another screen pass where you pick up 6 yards and punt. That's what this offense has looked like the last couple of weeks. And I was laughing on the phone call with him because I saw this in 2020. You've seen it at different points, and obviously Michigan had more talent, so they were able to overcome it in some other years, and other guys had more responsibilities in 2021, like Sharon Moore. But this is kind of what that offense has become. They gutted out a win last week over Nebraska, but the Josh Gaddis offense, has not been all that good this year.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it myself. So, I like this trip. I really do. Football and crab cakes, right? That's what Maryland is known for. Maybe it's just crab cakes right now. I don't know. But I always thought it was basketball and crab cakes, and then their basketball program started to suck too. So maybe, hopefully some lobster that we can afford. Maybe crab legs are more affordable out there. I don't know. I know I'm rambling here. But I'm looking forward to having dinner with you guys, number one. Number two, Maryland is such an enigma, guys, because, you see the first half against Ohio State, and you're like, man, they're in this game, and they're in that game for, 3 quarters or something like that, and playing them tough. But it seems like when they're out of it late in the year, it can go either way. They've played Ohio State tough a few times, and down the stretch as a trap game for Michigan. That Michigan's not going to want to show everything here, but flat out, Michigan's just a better football team, and they rarely struggle with Maryland. I think last year was one of the exceptions, and that was the first game, Big Ten game of the year. So I expect Michigan to give Talia all he can handle. I think he's had turnovers in each of his last 3 games, if I'm not mistaken. And he is prone to that. I think he had 2 picks against Michigan last year. I don't see them running the ball on Michigan. So if he's got to beat them and they're struggling to move the ball with the big play and they got to use the entire field to get there, I don't see that happening.
I think maybe the biggest advantage that Michigan does have in this game is the Jesse Minter versus Josh Gaddis matchup, honestly. Again, shout out to Josh Gaddis for what he helped achieve in 2021. He won the Broyles Award, but my God, you watch this Maryland offense, and it just seems like they should be better than they are, especially since Talia Tagovailoa has been in college for 8 years now. I'm sure I don't know if he's getting his doctorate or what the hell is going on with that, but yeah, man. I mean, you look at this matchup; they don't run the ball super well. I do think that Roman Hemby's a solid player, but this is when you look at the talent on paper, you can make the argument, and it's probably accurate that this might be the second most talented team that they've seen so far this year. Now, a lot of that has to do with the fact that they've seen a lot of crappy teams to start the year. But this Maryland program, and really this Maryland offense, has never, the sum has never added up to the parts that they have. I mean, they've always had good skill players. They've had, a really good quarterback the last few years. And again, I mean, if they're able to, it's another one of those outlier games. If they're able to run the ball, if they're able to move, stay on the field on third down, then yeah, maybe they put a scare into Michigan. But I just don't see when push comes to shove where this Maryland team can attack Michigan and on their defense to kind of give them even a puncher's chance in this game. I mean, I think that Michigan will win this game up front on both sides of the ball because that's not where Maryland's talent is.
Yeah, you look back to the game 2 years ago in College Park, which was in the same exact situation. Penn State, Maryland, Ohio State, Michigan schedule. A couple years ago, they had that big third quarter where they were really moving the football, like a couple hundred yards of offense or whatever it was. And then last year, like Chris, you said, I mean, they moved the football against Michigan. I think the difference here is, one, Talia is just kind of the same player as he was, and that's, I think, the biggest disappointment for Maryland fans is that he hasn't progressed past what he was 2 years ago in his first year as kind of the full-time starter. But then secondly, the offensive line's worse. They lost 4 out of 5 starters there. The wide receiving core isn't as good as it was before. The running backs are all back from a year ago, but not producing as well, due in part to the offensive line and, potentially whatever they're doing schematically offensively with those guys. So it just doesn't feel like they have as much there, but I'm always a little, worried, not worried, but you got to have a little bit of concern sometimes when a team does have a gunslinger at quarterback, some pretty good skill position players, a defense that gets takeaways. They have a lot of, forced turnovers and interceptions, but, I think Michigan should be able to, do kind of whatever they want. And then the last thing with the Michigan defense, Chris Jenkins, according to Mike Elston, we kept hearing he's banged up, he's not maybe practicing as much, and, his snap counts have gone down a little bit. He was playing through a high ankle sprain. I don't know how bad it was exactly, but high ankle sprain is very tough to play through, and you wouldn't have really known for sure it was that. Maybe you thought it was like a, something just nagging him, but a high ankle sprain, he said he should be back to fully healthy this week, and we should see the Chris Jenkins, not only him moving around the same way, but his production the way that you're used to seeing it, because it's really just not there this year, and obviously he's facing more double teams. But look out for potential Chris Jenkins down the stretch here, taking a leap up in his production